It's number one, so if you perhaps like to have a look through that and say something. The microphone's that way.
What do you want me to say?
Oh, just basically a roundup of what was happening at that time. First of all, when did the official, like that guitar you made originally, when was that?
Which is that?
That one over there.
The
one over there.
No, the one over there. That was made in the 1930s, early 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
But it was made, purely as an individual guitar. I was quite a young guy, and of course things were very difficult then. And as far as I was concerned, the only way I could get a good guitar was to try and make one. Rather egotistical, I suppose, but at the same time I felt confident enough to do it, and it was far better than what I was able to afford anyway. But it's still held together and it's quite good. But that particular guitar and another one that matched it, which was a 4-string tenor guitar, both of those were made. And I might say even prior to that there was another guitar made, and a Spanish guitar, and unfortunately it was stolen, and where that ended up. But that would have been even prior to that particular model. I might add, with all these guitars, they were definitely handmade, hand-cut materials. The materials were sawn down by hand, and they were without any aid of machinery at all.
This catalogue, number one, 1949. So the company had started officially in 1946.
Yes, 46, and there were brochures brought out on the few models we're doing, and as you know, Frank, we've got a record of all those guitars that were made right from that period when the first ones were made and where they went, as we do today. We know where every guitar ends up. And after some years we prepared this catalogue of models on the front. It was done in a two-tone colour, which was quite attractive, and the star line is very well displayed on the front of the catalogue, and the Starline electric model is on the inside of the page. Now, the electric models were just sort of starting to make their presence felt in orchestras as such. It was a large semi-acoustic guitar. And then we had the Mayfair model, which was purely acoustic guitar. These were very, very popular.
They were all hand-carved tops?
Yeah, hand-carved tops, yes, and backs on them. And these really made their name in New South Wales, and there's many of the old players, or even Don Andrews, who we all know very well, had one of these guitars when he was quite a young fellow.
There's a
got
picture
some photographs of Don many years ago. And when you open the centre part of this catalogue, you come to many photographs of guitarists in bands or individual ones, even the country style and the jazz players, and very good teachers, Roy Royston and Don Andrews, who were teaching. Johnny Edgecombe, Nev Harland, and of course in Melbourne players had them also.
There's one of Tico Morello. What did he actually do?
Well, he did a lot of continental style of playing, which was popular, but there wasn't a great deal of it then. The guitar had a very broad spectrum of work as an individual instrument.
Electric guitars then, like there were no solid body guitars then, I suppose?
Not really as such, no, Frank. It was a transitional period from the acoustic guitar to the electric, and as it is known, that many of the guitars that were made did have problems because you've got to make constructional differences to an acoustic electric than the acoustic guitar. That's if you're building pickups into them.
And what the electric ones are a bit more solid in the top, I suppose, were they more rigid?
Yes. The whole thing about it is that if you build pickups into an acoustic guitar, a carved top guitar, you've got to be very careful your construction bars under the top and not cut through and weaken it. But also there's so much sound generated within the guitar itself, it creates this cycle of feedback, and that has got to be controlled in the electric guitar, which of course is done nowadays. I might mention too, there's another guitar, the Gold Tone G210, which was a very popular jazz guitar at the time. There's quite a lot of them about now that people have had restored, and that was also a carved top guitar.
And the truss rod system on that was the Maton double thrust system?
It hadn't quite reached that perfection stage, but it was a patent system that we adopted, and all guitars were adjusting their necks from up on the headpiece stock, as you know. We have never had it like that. We've resorted to it always being down at the butt end where there's a good anchorage for making the adjustment, and also we always felt it was a good idea to keep it away from too many tampering people who might do them harm. So it really, we've stuck to it, and it's generally accepted as a very good method nowadays. We had flat tops too then. There was HG 100 here, a little bit different in size to what it is now, and we also had a cooler bar. The early cooler bar was one of the first guitars, nothing like the cooler bar of today, but still, as you can see, we had many things in mind to develop an individuality about our guitars, so that we could be proud of them being made in Australia. But that little catalogue gave an indication of the type of things we were doing, and the general feeling that we were out to make quality, and so we proceeded to do that.
There's, I noticed in the back there's a little nice looking little arch top guitar. That one.
Yes.
What's that? The
45, the Premier 45.
There was one I remember seeing around that looked a bit like that, with a, I think it even had a carved top perhaps, that was in around the 49 area. That's the same one.
Yes.
That was a pretty early one, was it?
That's right. There was the F240 and the 45A, and they were arch top guitars, again used just as rhythm guitars, but there's still, a few people around with them, and apparently commanding reasonable prices. Well, all our older guitars are now, which I think happens with older instruments.
It's hard to get them. I've been trying to buy some old ones to get done up that we could hang up in the showroom in there, and I can't even find any.
Well, that model there, you see, was one of the first guitars that you see over here. Flat top. Its shape is based on early German designs before we, became very specific about our designs. And I happened to buy that back from some fellow at some crazy price, but still it was the only opportunity we had of getting one of the first early guitars. That would have been about number 6 that we had made. Really? And so it's in reasonable order, but
still
it's
playable. Yeah.
Oh yes, still playable. And it's had a battering time, but however, it's good to have it again. And so that's its original.
Good. Well, I'll just have a hunt through and we'll see if we can find the next catalogue. See.
Now, what happened then was that we were working at the time in a very small workshop in Thornbury.
This was in what, 49 area?
Yes, 4950. And we had the use of some plant, for preparing our materials, because we really insisted on doing that, to get your materials cut and prepared by other people. There's too many things can go wrong with expensive woods. So we carried on there, and then we planned for our development. And we looked around and found a suitable area, which of course is where we are now. There's plenty of space, and we proceeded to build a small factory on that during the post-war period, which was very difficult because materials were hard to get. There was a government department known as the Building Directorate, and they controlled every brick and piece of sand or mortar, a bit of wood you used. So, but we battled to get this part of this factory built. So that when we had that ready to go into, we moved over with our small plant and we continued to make the lines that are shown in this catalogue with extensions of a few other flat tops and also introducing cutaways into some of the other jazz models. And that's where this catalogue came out, the folding one, and about another three to 5 years later.
Which we haven't got.
No, we haven't got there, but you can refer to it. It was just in black and white, but it showed all the models. We were making amplifiers at the time, not a great deal, but as we proceeded, we began to refine the products more. There was a lot to learn, as there always is when you're pioneering the business. And it's mainly by trial and error. There's so many unknowns in the beginning in making instruments that you've got to work out and find out how they relate to the natural sciences so that you can have a formula for building. So we proceeded on, and when we brought out our next catalogue, we included in this our new solid body guitars. And these are fairly early in the piece, and one of the first ones we produced was the MS-500.
George Harrison had one of those.
Yes,
too,
George Harrison, the Beatles, had one of those. And it was quite a good guitar. But at the time, not many people were attracted to it being solid. They were still orientated to the acoustic type of guitar, the larger one. It was a short scale, a very, very low action, slim little body on it, small. It was a very comfortable guitar to play and had a very, very good sound. Mainly by luck, I suppose, rather than by working out, because it was very difficult to get materials for solid instruments. And we were not working on scientific basis as we are today. We were using what other people had used or what we thought they were using, and it turned out a fairly good guitar. And we made another smaller one, a cheaper model, which I think sold for around about, at that time, about, £45, I think it was then. And that was the Gold Line, we called it.
Yeah, there's one of those at the factory.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's got a little edge around it. Quite a good sound, but the MS-500, of course, was the leader in it.
And that was, what would have been about 56-ish?
Ah, yes. A little bit earlier than that.
Yeah,
it might
55.
be about 54. And there were quite a lot of them made. Now, I don't know what I can think of it more on those, not having it in front of me. It's I've just got to memorise them at the moment.
Yeah, I've seen that MS-500 catalogue. It's a pity we haven't got it here. There's some of them running around at the factory.
It gives you the details, and I can sort of think what happened then.
Style GTA.
Whilst we were making these solid guitars and still continuing with our flat tops and the carved top and arch top guitars, we produced a classic guitar, because we had sufficient experience then to really go into this type of building, because there's no doubt about it, the classic guitar is the foundation of all guitar building. I'm convinced of that. After all these years of doing many things, it is the foundation. I didn't realise that at the time, but however, we made a model out of maple, red maple, and it was quite a light guitar, and we called it the C30. Now there's quite a few of these guitars around now, but you'd be very, very hard pressed to buy one. We've had them in for servicing, people who wanted things done with them. And they're very, very good sound. They're very old and crisp, and they're very, very good. Not particularly a great volume, but a very, very nice,
very smooth,
very smooth tone, sustained very well. That was the beginning of our experience in classic guitars. In classic guitars, of course, as we know, the great makers have gone on making them and making changes and endeavouring to search for the hidden sound, you know,
right.
And everybody has different theories about them as to what to do next to make it better or what have you. And so we continued to make that particular model for quite some time, just the one model together with the other, because we were making a range of guitars. We were not just specialising in one particular field, because the market demand wouldn't enable you to do this, not the way we were endeavouring to build up this particular industry. So that from there we proceeded on, and I think you can see in one of these catalogues now.
See, there's a photo here of a fellow in the front cover of an English magazine somewhere.
Ah, yes.
This one. That's in 1961.
Yes, 1961, and this is where our guitars became very popular overseas, especially in England, and I think even today there's quite a few of our carved top guitars being used in big bands. Somebody told me one was in they went to a hotel and there was a huge band there, the older style, and using one of our guitars. So they were very popular there, and there was many of them went over there. So they must be still about, because they don't fall to pieces. So that was a very good era for the acoustic jazz guitar, which I think, just to a great degree, is holding its own and may even come back again a bit more.
This one here, I noticed this one's an electric acoustic, is it? It's got a pickup on it.
Yes, it's an acoustic guitar with a separate pickup attached.
Was George Goller playing them then, or was that before his time?
Yes, I think that George
was. 1961.
Yeah, it was the, yes, I think so, because George has, you know, been a very staunch user of our guitars, and we've had a lot of very good association with George. We've been very happy about it. He's a very nice guy, and has a very sound knowledge of his instrument. There's no doubt about that. We've learned a lot from George.
That catalogue there you've got, let's say call that one number 2.
This one?
Yeah. Well, actually, we'll make it. We haven't got the second or third one, have we? So we'll call that number 3 if you like.
We're just looking at a later catalogue in which we're introducing...
I'll stick a date on it perhaps, that might make it easier to follow. That'd be roughly.
Oh yeah, that'd be around about 68 probably.
Could it be a bit earlier than that perhaps?
Could have been, so I'm only guessing now because I haven't got all the other stuff with me.
So it could be, looking at some of that, it could be perhaps 65-ish.
Yeah, could have been, yeah. We'll put that down anyway. And at this stage in 65, we were making alterations to existing guitars. Double cutaways were coming in, and we brought in a guitar which at the time solid bodies was starting to got very popular, and we introduced the famous Firebird, and we sold many of these red guitars, and everywhere you went people were using Firebirds, and it was the forerunner before, you know, a lot of the American guitars came onto the market here, and Firebirds, they were really selling. It was very popular. And then, of course, whilst that was going on, we introduced some bit more sophisticated flat tops. We had one which was the early runner of our Southern Saturday. This was the early model, as you see there, and it had a guard plate on that was had a design on it, the flannel flower, which is an Australian flower, but this was the SS200. And along came the FG100 in its early stages, which is a very popular guitar today. Together with that, we began to introduce a 12-string guitar. The forerunner of all our 12 strings was the FG150. Early FG150s, still very, very good guitars. They benefit by age, of course. And the cooler bar was still running along quietly, not making much fuss, but it was still there. And the C30, it sort of got itself entrenched as our classic guitar. And meanwhile, we did still have our arch-top or carved-top guitars, but they were declining a little, more in favour of the electric acoustic models, which we are introducing, the Starline electric acoustic, and we developed a model which we called the George Goller guitar, and that had made changes over the period of time, but it was introduced in this period.
This one here,
as you can see, there are plenty of indications around about the truss rod system, which has enabled us to give very good warranties on our guitars. That would be further on. That would be about 1968. Where you see the Southern Star SS300-6 and the Southern Star SS300-12. They made their debut as top-line flat-top guitars.
There's another little one here, the Maton Lute electric guitar.
Well, these were brought out, the Maton Lute bass and the Maton Lute guitar, shaped with a pear-shaped body. The bass was very popular, it was very light and had a reasonably good sound. The guitar was brought out because of the popularity of new types of models,
shapes and things.
We were all doing a lot of experimenting and that sort of thing.
It's got the sapphire on the back, I think, too.
Yes. Well, this came a little later on in the late 60s, the 70s.
So that's 68, 69.
Yes, and then we introduced the sapphire models. 6-string guitar with double cutaway, and the 12-string model, which 12 strings was sort of being experimented with a lot and used quite a bit with early rock groups. The Beatles used 12-string guitars, as you know, so that it became popular to use them as electrics. And also with the 12-string there was the sapphire bass with the three sapphire models. They were the forerunners of even sapphire guitars as we know today.
We've got the Baroque bass here.
Oh yes. Yes, well now at that time...
That was about 70, 69, was it?
Yes. As you can see, these sapphire models are an extension on the earlier ones, a little different pickups, a little bit larger, twin core pickups to the earlier models. And whilst we were doing that, we were doing quite a lot of experimenting with bass because it required a different technique and approach to our building and our thinking. And we introduced the Baroque bass, which was shaped like a violin. This was not the type of instrument that the rock groups would use, but it was influenced a lot of the more legit bass players that were entering into the electric bass field, because they were finding the demand for them to use electric basses was overriding the use of the acoustic bass.
Right.
While we were doing that, of course, we introduced also some steel guitars, a few models of standard steel guitars, a lap steel and also a twin neck, one mounted on adjustable legs. they were very popular at the time for a wine style of music.
And how are the amplifiers going?
Well, amplifiers, we were gradually building up with these, and also we had very good results. They were built very steadily. We didn't make such a lot of them, but we built, enough to enter the market with a reasonable amount of impact.
This one will be about 69 with the television cameras on it.
Yes. We've got models here with the television cameras on it, and they're more solid body models, but one of them was called the G250, and the bass was the B250, and then we had the Apollo guitar we introduced after the Sapphire, which there's a few of those around now.
You had someone write a letter about one the other day that wanted to find out a bit of information.
That's right.
So
and there's quite a lot of details about it down here.
So there'll be 69, 70 area.
Yes, that's right. And also, we changed the Firebird, whether that was right or wrong, but however, change was the order of the day at that particular time, and we introduced the Firebirds 70 and the Firebird bass 71, and then we also had a new solid body guitar called the AX5, small,
sort of a Les Paul type,
similar type to that,
that was sort of the forerunner for the Phil Manning sort of.
Yes, that's right. So, we had quite a lot of our stuff was used on television even in those days. Meanwhile, the acoustic guitars, the flat tops, were gradually increasing in favour against acoustic electrics. They were still being used, but at the same time, the flat tops were steadily growing.
There's a nice, in this 72 catalogue, there's the Sapphire and the George Goller guitar.
That's right. Yes, there's the...
So GG22 came out in about 72, wasn't it?
That's right, yes. Well, that's when some more subtle changes were made in the building of these guitars. Shape-wise, there may not have been a lot of difference, but constructional details were being pursued in every attempt to keep improving the guitars. Because that's the only way you do.
Resin finishes were coming in around it.
Yes, that's right, yes. We changed the materials that were being used from the early days because there's a tendency for many of the lacquers to crack and craze because they lost their plasticizer material, and the guitar is going to be subject to all sorts of conditions. It's got to expand and contract a bit, so you must have a material that can at least withstand that to some degree. As you can see here, we brought out also the GE500. It's a very complex type of guitar in a way, with it had a special type of bridge, acoustic bridge.
It had a ceramic pickup built into it.
Yes, ceramics built into the bridge. It was really the forerunner of more of the use of this type of ceramics in pickups. So that was quite a popular guitar with some of the players who could handle it.
Yes, a friend of mine that records with one actually.
Oh yes.
Good.
Then of course we had a number of guitars that some of them went well and others didn't. We brought out the Wildcat line of guitars. They were a little bit different. Gradually working up, to the models we produce today. There's still quite a few of those around still.
And the what we got here, sort of following that, we've got the present catalogue. The Bindara bass, that 4-string bass, there's been a lot of interest in those over the years. When did that actually first put in?
Oh yes, the Bindara bass. Well, that came out in the early 70s also. They're more or less custom-built type of an instrument. Not a great deal were built at the time, and they were based on the style of bass that the Mexican mariachi bands use. But we having seen them while I was in Mexico at one time, I thought that they had a possibility, but we made them in a much more refined manner. They weren't as rough, and also we felt that they had a little bit more scope in the sound.
The electrochemical curing, when did that actually start really appearing?
That started, we put this into process some 8 to 10 years ago, but it took quite some time to develop it in a way in which it would do what we required. We'd always felt that there was a big problem in getting woods in a suitable state to use into instruments. And what I mean by that is that they were not properly dried at times, or if they had been, they hadn't been dry long enough. And this was, as I could see, would be a problem in the future for us, because woods were getting used up at a greater rate in some cases than what they could be replaced. So the old method of where you could go and find woods from a yard or some building that would be years and years old, and that you would be able to continue to do this, I could see that was going to come to an end. So there had to be some way in which we could be sure that we could get the timbers or the woods into a state where they could be satisfactorily relied on. And we started to do this by endeavouring to dry the woods out in hot plates to get moisture out of them, or anything at all that we felt might improve the situation of expansion and contraction and buckling. And so from that earliest time we developed with the correct plant to cure woods by electronic means, by high frequency induction into woods by bombarding the molecule structure of it at a very rapid rate, and this movement of the molecule structure created energy or heat within the woods, the internal part of it, and thus would drive out the moisture and also cure the resins that were in the wood. So to us, we felt that kiln drying was a way of drying woods, but you sent out also a lot of the resins, which are very important to retain in sound. The resin is a means by which you can get the hardness into the wood and carry the high frequencies. And that's briefly what it's about. It's quite a complex process.
There's some material in it in the catalogue?
Yes, in our latest catalogue there is. As I said here, in the past woods were seasoned and made ready for use by the long time process. But this did not give any measure of guarantee of success in the end result. And what we mean by that is that you would use woods that were presumably dry, but there was not a complete analysis made of these woods before you put them into an instrument. You used perhaps maple or rosewood because everybody else used it. It was a thing to use, so you do what other people do, but we just were not satisfied with that. We wanted to make an analysis of the woods, in other words, to get some scientific approach to it so that we could be sure about the materials and also what they were going to do in relation to affecting the sound. And so, you know, without going on a long way into that, that has really been the process. And there's so many things we haven't touched on it now, but of course that's progress.
Right.
If you feel as though you know everything, well, that's when you're going backwards. There's so much more to learn, and as you can see in this brochure now, we've got our defined areas of our flat tops, our concert guitars are up in the top echelon of world-class instruments. And then we've got our medium range guitars, which are very, very sound and reliable, and give the quality of sound suitable for any professional use. And the electric systems we've applied to our flat tops have been very, very reliable, giving the true acoustic sound. And now our JB models that we have now, as you know...
Well, that's been running for a while. That's been quite successful.
The JB guitars, and of course the JB4 basses have really been an outstanding success. Due, of course, to this research. It's a result of the work that's been put in. It's not a matter of luck at all. You need quite an amount of luck in doing things, of course, but when you're coming to making the instruments, it's a result of known processes and results to achieve good guitars. And that now has also assisted us in making some very, very high standard classic guitars. Our latest classic guitars would be, in world-class standard, and classic guitars are not easy things to build. Most frustrating at times. But as you can see in this catalogue at the end of it, it does tell you what we do and how we go about it, and a few pictures showing them. And in all, it's a little bit of form of information as well as the product. It's not meant to outstrip the product. We always like to think you look at the catalogue, and then when you see the guitars are much better than you thought they were.
Right.
And so the whole thing reflects the artistic approach to this type of craft, which we feel we wish to pursue with, because so many people are looking for high quality instruments, and we're here to provide them.
Fair enough. That sounds pretty good. I think that should give them a bit of material.
Well, you can add anything to that which you wish to.
Basically, like, we've got a lot of other stuff too. What I'll do, I'll send them this, and when I get back from Tassie, I'll have a look through those other things and see if we could fill in some of the gaps with some of those other catalogues.
What I didn't sort of probably stay, if we started out in a small way, yes, then we would. Anyway, play it back and we'll listen to it.